It's 6:30 p.m. on August 14th, 2023, and we are about to begin the Planning and Development Council meeting of the Town of Oakville. Welcome, everybody. Madam Clerk, do we have regrets for this meeting?
I believe we may have regrets from Councillor Knoll, as he was in a remote location and may have been unable to join.
Well, he's away on police business, so of an administrative kind, let me be quick to say. So we'll hope for a report from him later. So, Councillor, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. A mover and seconder for Committee of the Whole would be in order now. Councillor Longo and Councillor McNeice, thank you. Any objection? That carries. And that brings us to the consent items. Now, we have registered delegations for 4.2 and 4.5. 4.2 is the request for release of subdivision agreement, and it's related to a confidential item 5.1. And as far as I know, we have no registered delegations on this matter. It turns out the registered delegation was for questions only. 4. Where was I? So, and then 4.5 is a notice of intention to designate, and we have a registered delegation who has a presentation on that one. So I would like to know if I could get a motion for all of the consent items except for 4.5. Councillor Giddings, thank you. Any objections?
Could I separate
4.6? That carries. Sorry?
Sorry, could I separate 4.6, Your Worship? 4.6?
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, so the motion there is that the matter be referred back to staff until all conditions are met.
Is that what you want?
There's a memo distributed with a recommendation to refer the application back to staff until all conditions are met. And as a result, the bylaw is being withdrawn and not to be passed.
No.
Is that helpful?
I didn't see it.
I don't think we saw that.
Well,
Does that help?
when I tell you that the memo's been distributed, I'm relying on the clerk's claim that such was done.
Okay, I'm fine with that, thank you.
All right. All right, so everything but 4.5 has passed as indicated by the clerk's agenda. And now 4.5. Carolyn Van Slichtenhorst, our supervisor of Heritage Conservation, is available for questions. And we have a registered delegation, Catherine Meager. And Ms. Meager, we'd be delighted to hear from you now and to enjoy your presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Maher, and with my husband Tom Maher, we are the owners of 356 Watson Avenue, which is listed at item 4.5 in your agendas, notice of intention to designate 356 Watson Avenue. I want to thank Council for the opportunity to appear before you tonight, and I also want to thank Carolyn, who you mentioned a moment ago. She and I have different points of view on this property, but she has been excellent to work with, very forthcoming with information and answering all of our questions, being very transparent about the process. So we're very grateful to Carolyn. So as property owners, we received a copy of the Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report, which is set out at Appendix B to item 4.5. We reviewed this report in detail and the 4 criteria set out in the report in support of designation of this property. We are not convinced that there is sufficient evidence laid out in the report to demonstrate that the criteria in Regulation 9-06 under the Ontario Heritage Act has been met. And as such, we oppose their recommendation to designate. I did appear before the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee and reviewed each of these criteria, these 4 criteria, in as much detail as I could in the allotted time. It really wasn't possible, and I'm not going to propose to do that here with you tonight. There just simply isn't the time to dig into each one. I just want to say again that we do not think that there is sufficient evidence that has been presented in the report to convince us that each of these 4 criteria have been met. And this is particularly true given that the language in the Ontario Heritage Act is quite broad, and it is open to interpretation other than that presented by the town staff in their recommendation and in their report to council and the committee. So tonight with you, I just want to zero in on one of the criteria in particular, one that we find especially problematic, and that is that the property supports and maintains the historic residential character of the Brantwood subdivision. We submit to you that the historic character of the Brantwood subdivision is gone, and that there is little that this property's designation can do to support or to maintain the complexion of a neighborhood that has fundamentally changed. I've been in the home for 10 years. I've seen this change occur before my eyes, and it's accelerated in the last few years. If I could, I just wanted to pull up a few slides. I would love to present more. There just isn't the time. If we could go to slide number 2, please. I just want to show you a little bit of Brantwood as we see it around our home. So this is the home that's immediately to the south of us. This is our neighbor. As you can see, it's a very modern structure. When we moved in 10 years ago, there were not a lot of homes like this necessarily in Brantwood. That is very different today. More and more you're seeing modern structures like this in the subdivisions. This is no longer unusual in our view. If we go to slide number 3, please, this is the home immediately to the north of us. You'll see it's a 1950s bungalow. I can't read the future. I don't know what will happen here, but based on what I see around Brantwood every day, I would be very surprised if this continues to exist like this for, in the years and decades to come. Again, I'm not a mind reader. Slide number 4. This again is so you see our home at the top there, and then you see these are the homes around us. You see the 3 homes to the south of us, all modern structures, and query, if you're walking along the street, are you going to think to yourself, this is a historic neighborhood, and this home, our home, are you going to see it in the context of a historic neighborhood? We think not. I'd like to skip to slide 6, I believe it is. This just gives you a picture of what's happening on the other side of the street. So this is a home. It's around the same vintage as ours. It's also a listed property. It looked very different a few years ago. It used to have different fenestration. It had a wooden porch. It had cedar shingles. It's now been gutted and modernized, and the property owner has chosen to take it in a new direction. I think it looks quite nice. This is, again, the sort of thing that is happening in Brantwood. If you go to the last slide, slide 9, I've got to skip over some of what else I wanted to put in here. This I found interesting. This was an old cultural heritage report from 2011, where obviously the Brantwood subdivision had been considered for designation, I think, perhaps, but you would know better than I, but by the council or by Heritage Oakville. And it clearly did not happen. So in the intervening years, this neighborhood has grown, it's developed, and it's modernized, much like, I think, Oakville itself. It is very different than it was 10 years ago. I think, you contrast this to the downtown, which is a district, a heritage district, Cultural 5, like was considered at one time for Brantwood. It's cohesive, you walk around, you have a sense of how people lived in a different time. I submit that is no longer the case in Brantwood. And it just, the time to designate, the time to sort of preserve that feeling in Brantwood has passed. In our view, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and the time to have maybe done this was 20 years ago. To do it now, we feel puts an onerous burden on us as individual homeowners, and it doesn't necessarily get the balance right between cultural preservation and individual property rights. I think in this instance, there just isn't the best evidence, And this house is not the most compelling house to stand out for designation. I just also note, we do feel there is a bit of an element of, some procedural unfairness in this too. We moved in 10 years ago. We knew it was listed. That was something we were aware of, but it was not a historic property. It was not designated, and we didn't have any intimation or sense in any of the 10 years that we've been there that this might be the case. We've never been approached by the town or by anyone to suggest that this home is of cultural significance until now. So given that, and given that we're opposed, we especially feel like this legislative criteria really needs to be met. We don't think it's met here, and so we would ask council to not to designate this property, and we would also urge council to consider this question with respect to Brantwood. There's lots of homes, I think, in this process that are going to be from the Brantwood area that there's going to be proposed for designation, and I think it really does need to be considered. Is Brantwood this historic neighborhood that preserving these homes can maintain? You've seen a little snippet of what it looks like. I urge you, if you aren't familiar with Brantwood, if it's not in your area, especially given how many homes are up for designation, to look and see what's going on in that neighborhood. It has really changed and is continuing to change. So I want to thank you for your time tonight. We really do appreciate the opportunity. We believe in cultural preservation. We think Oakville has done a wonderful job, but the balance is very important, and the balance is not right in this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for the lady? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Councilor Dudek?
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if we could have the benefit of Carolyn to come forward and sort of give some sort of sense of what transpired at the Heritage Committee in terms of dialogue and the difference between a Part 4 and a Part 5, because there was reference to a district versus what we're doing here, which is a Part 4.
Councilor Dudek, yes, thank you. Great idea. Ms. Lichtenhorst, I think you know the questions that Councilor Dudek and the others would like to hear.
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. So to Councilor Dudek and the rest of council, for the district in this area, we had looked at the potential for a district in Brantwood, which would mean we'd be designating the whole of the area, and each of the properties in that area would be designated, whether or not they have a contemporary house or a historic house. When you designate a district, there needs to be a substantial amount of the properties which are heritage, and it was found in Brantwood that there wasn't enough to justify a district, similar as you see in Old Oakville, south of Lakeshore, along the lake. However, we decided that the approach really was best to look at Part 4 or individual designations in the area, and so that's what we've done through this designation project as well. So we are looking at about 15 to 18 properties for designation, individual designations within the Brantwood neighborhood. And in our mind, those are really anchors for the neighborhood. A lot of them are on corner properties, or a lot of them are really, they stand tall and proud. They're in very good condition, and they're really reflective of the arts and crafts architectural period, which Brantwood was really based on at the beginning. So when Brantwood was developed, it was really seen as this lovely new neighborhood for people from other cities like Toronto to come to Oakville and build these lovely large kind of cottage homes, but they were quite large, not small cottages. And these are the ones we've really been focusing on. And we do agree, some of these we have lost in the past, and there are new structures in the neighborhood. Another reason for some new structures is just the evolution of this neighborhood. A lot of these bigger homes that we're looking at designating were built on multiple lots. So you'd have one large house on 4 or 5 lots, and over time they subdivided, and new homes were built in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. So it really is a mix of different architectural styles and eras, but our goal was really to focus on designating individually those houses that, again, anchored Brantwood and are really reflective of the architectural style and its original history that was really began just prior to World War I and really took off right after World War I. So hopefully that kind of helps just distinguish in terms of where we were coming out from a Part 4 individual property versus Part 5 a district.
And I
Ms.
believe,
Lichtenhurst, could you just amplify that by explaining, do we do Part 4 designations outside of Part 5 districts? Is that common? Is that?
Absolutely, Your Worship. We have about 170 individually designated properties that are, for the most part, outside of districts.
Thank you. Councillor Dudek?
yeah, pardon me. I did want to build on what was raised at committee, and there's a similarity to this Brantwood Park area being similar to Tuxedo Park, which is up on Spruce, and that where we were faced with the same sort of dilemma. It didn't quite qualify to become a Part 5 district, but there were still sufficient homes that could be designated under Part 4. So I just provide that for the benefit of some of the newer members on council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. Councillor O'Meara, then Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you very much. Just a question, and it might sort of buttress onto Councillor Dudek's question. We saw in the presentation from the delegation how a house next door is completely rebuilt, but that one is being picked. Can you maybe just sort of pull the curtain back a little bit on how houses in and around that house might be able to be updated and changed, but that house on and of its own is up for designation?
Yes, through your worship to the councillor. The house next door was built around 2005, which was actually just when the Ontario Heritage Act was being updated to allow for listed properties and to provide a little bit more protection for individually designated properties. So at the time, whatever was there before could have been demolished without any sort of heritage restrictions. We now, after 2007 and 2009, the Oakville Heritage Register had a lot of listed properties put on it, so to keep those kinds of demolitions from happening. So in that scenario, you had a house, that was demolished with permission, which was, was permitted back then. But the other thing I would just note is there are other properties in the area, again, that the houses might have been built in the 60s or 70s as they were severed off of these original large lots. So you are still going to see more contemporary homes be constructed without any sort of heritage guidelines on them because it's not a district. So they do have the right to build, within the zoning bylaw, but without any sort of extra restrictions related to the design from a heritage perspective. So that is why you do see a mix of architectural styles in Brantwood. But again, our goal is not to, keep Brantwood from changing as you see it today, but to really try to maintain and conserve those special, unique houses that really reflect and represent the original plan for Brantwood, and really anchor that neighborhood, if that helps.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Just for clarity's sake, and the comments were made by the resident with respect to just finding out about this, and it's moved very quickly and so forth. Is there not within the process a differentiation between registered and designated? And the registered ones, are they aware that they're registered and with possible designation? To me, that's really important for these residents to understand that they're on a register and possibly can happen. So what steps are we taking, being ahead of the curve, what steps are we doing with those residents to let them know that they are registered and to move forward on that?
So through your worship to Councillor Chisholm, there is a requirement now when a property is listed on the Heritage Register in any municipality for the municipality to let them know of that. At the time when we added this property and most of the listed properties in Oakville in 2009, there was no requirement to notify them. However, we still did. We still sent a letter after council had added the properties to the register. So all of them were notified. It is not registered on title. We're not able to do that as we are with designated properties. So any listed property, when they purchase it though, they should be aware of that. The realtors should be identifying that through the sale. And again, that letter was sent anytime a property is added to the register. We haven't added any in quite a number of years. So, but we always did that. The other thing I would note is through this designation program, which is why we're getting all of these designations out of Bill 23. The listed status, that portion of the register will be gone as of January 1st, 2025. So with Heritage Oakville and Council support, we've been moving forward to designate a number of the listed properties that we still have on the register prior to January 1st, 2025. So Brantwood was one of those priority areas, and this is a house that came up through that process as a priority to designate. So through that process, we've identified, we've gotten to contact with owners. We've done this by letters in the mail, following up with phone calls or emails if we have any of that contact information, following up by that with door-to-door, knocking on doors, trying to get information. And so we were able to do that in this case, the door-to-door. We had a great conversation with the owners. So we really are trying to contact owners as much as absolutely possible. We don't like to designate without involving homeowners or property owners. We really like to try to work with everyone holistically and together as much as possible.
All right, Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just again, for the benefit of some of our newer colleagues on council, just so they're aware, a designation does not adhere to the interior of the property, or the building rather. It's basically the exterior which is being identified and being preserved, so they can still go ahead and do the necessary renovations within the interior. We don't designate that, do we not?
Yes, through your worship, Councillor Dudek, thank you for raising that point. And I will note, we do in each of these research reports in your agenda have a statement of cultural heritage value or interest at the end of each of them. And that basically outlines what the designation bylaw would look like, and that it identifies the heritage attributes. So in this case, we really looked at preserving and including the attributes which are really the main form of the building as you see it from the street. We did not include the rear of the building so that new additions could be added on easily. You know, some of the pieces that have been added other year or over time, like an addition to the north, we didn't include that. And of course, no interior elements have been included. And again, even for those attributes which are proposed to be included, it doesn't mean you could never change those or never fix those. It's really about managing those changes so we know that's being done properly. And we also have our grant program to assist financially with that as well. So hopefully that helps.
So Councillor Dudek, are you moving the recommendation? Thank you. Is there any objection to Councillor Dudek's motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and therefore that carries. And that gets us to our first public hearing item. This is the public meeting report for the Caniff Group on Bristol Circle. We have a presentation from the applicant, Kevin Freeman of the Caniff Group. Staff will be available for questions. If you're watching the live stream of this meeting on oakville.ca and you wish to speak to this item, you can call 905-815-6095 to be connected to the meeting, and you'll be called on to speak after any other delegations that I'm not aware of here. We'll poll the audience for further delegations. And I just want to make one more word about this. This is the issue collecting part of a planning application where we hopefully don't debate and argue about it. We just identify what the issues are that we want to make sure that staff cover in whatever, in their recommendation report, be they giving a recommendation to approve or disapprove. And with that, let's give the floor now to Mr. Freeman. Welcome. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of the public. My name is Kevin Freeman, and I'm a planner with Caniff Group of Companies. I'm here before you today to provide a statutory public meeting presentation for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment application that we've submitted for a property located at 2350 and 2360 Bristol Circle. Throughout my presentation, I will provide a brief overview of the subject property, development proposal, and the policy context. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the subject property is located at the northwest corner of Bristol Circle and Brighton Road and is municipally known as 2350 and 2360 Bristol Circle. The property is a site area of 1.2 hectares and currently contains an existing 4-story office building with a net floor area of approximately 4,200 square meters. Access to the site is currently provided by way of a signalized full moves access to Bristol Circle and a full moves access to Brighton Road. Surrounding the property are several employment-related land uses, including office, general industrial, and manufacturing uses. Next slide, please. Our application proposes to amend the zoning bylaw to permit a single-story 2,800 square meter warehouse on the vacant portion of the subject property. The existing 4-story office building to the north will be retained. The access to Brighton Road and existing parking layout is proposed to be modified to facilitate truck movements. Truck traffic will solely utilize the southwesterly access to Brighton Road and will not interfere with the existing office parking or pedestrian and vehicular circulation. A total of 127 parking spaces will be provided on the site. And next slide, please. According to the official plan, the subject property is designated business employment according to Schedule J East Land Use. The business employment designation permits a wide range of business and industrial uses, including office, industrial, manufacturing, and warehousing. The development proposal and proposed zoning bylaw amendment conforms with the official plan. Next slide, please. The subject property is currently zoned Office Employment Special Provision 43, which currently permits a range of office and employment-related land uses. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment seeks to amend the Office Employment Special Provision Zone to Business Employment Special Provision to permit the proposed warehouse use and the list of uses permitted by the Business Employment Zone. And next slide, please. On the screen are a few conceptual renderings of the proposal, which illustrates the configuration of the proposed building, the location of the principal access on the north elevation, and the landscape buffer along Bristol Circle and Brighton Road. And next slide, please. And lastly, a public information meeting was held on May 24th, in which no members of the public were in attendance. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time and attention, and happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Looks like you have one from Councillor Adams.
Thanks very much for the presentation. Thanks for the discussion we had previously on this matter. I just want, and I know it's already flagged in the staff report about the sightline issue that we discussed at the meeting. It wasn't part of the minutes of that meeting, but I thought I should raise it because we did discuss it. In particular, is that corner issue as to whether that sightline was satisfactory. And I wonder, perhaps our staff can, I'm not sure if you have any comments on it at this point, or if you want to report back on it later.
Through you, Mayor Burton, our transportation engineer has looked at the site plan, and they haven't indicated any sightline issues at this point.
I'm sorry, there are no sightline issues?
That is correct.
They're satisfied. Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Could you, is it possible to know, do you know who the tenant will be for this warehouse? And is it, and sort of, is it possible it's going to be what they call a delivery station?
We're not sure exactly yet who the tenant might be. We will likely secure a tenant before we submit an application for a site plan review, which we'll get into the more detailed design of the warehouse building. For the time being, we just want to be able to secure our land use permissions and build this as quickly as we can. We've all the confidence in the world we'll be able to secure a quality tenant that can fit that space.
Thank you very much for that. So I would just, to staff, just emphasize under that transportation implication that if it happens to be potentially a delivery station, the amount of traffic going in and out will be different than a standard warehouse, and that should be probably taken into consideration. Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Freeman, I think you're done.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for your
Thank you very
time.
much. Have a good evening.
Councillor Adams.
I'd be pleased to move the staff recommendation.
All right. Mr. Charles or Mr. Riaz, I guess the only issue you've caught to add is Councillor Haslett-Deal's concern that the warehouse might not be a warehouse, but some other thing called a delivery station.
That is correct, Mayor Burton. In addition to the items listed in the staff report, staff will be reporting on if it is a delivery station, if there's any transportation issues related to that.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there any objection to Councillor Adams' motion? Madam Clerk, there is no objection and the motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Adams. Now, we come to the event of the evening. The crowd has assembled. I regret there was no popcorn. This is a recommendation report for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for Amica Brawny Village, Inc., and on 2370 Lakeshore Road West. Our planner, Colin Westerhoff, has a presentation, and we have registered delegation whom we will hear from after we hear from Mr. Westerhoff. Mr. Westerhoff, we are all eyes and ears.
Excellent. Thank you, and thank you, Your Worship, members of council, and members of the public in attendance today. This presentation will provide an overview, excuse me, on the recommendation report for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, which is agenda item 7.1 on tonight's agenda. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located along the south side of Lakeshore Road West, east of Jones Street, west of Nelson Street, and north of Marine Drive. They're highlighted above. Next slide, please. So the subject applications are to establish the building envelope and development-specific regulations for a mixed-use retirement home. The design of the building and site will be further refined through the site plan control process. The purpose of the applications are twofold. One, to provide a policy exception under the town's official plan to permit a maximum building height of 6 stories within the Main Street 1 designation of the Brawny Village growth area. And two, to apply site-specific development regulations to permit the construction of the proposed 6-story mixed-use retirement home. The mixed-use retirement home will be subject to site plan control. Staff will continue to work with the applicant and partner agencies to address technical development considerations. Next slide, please. So this is a rendering of the proposed new 6-story retirement home. And since the statutory public meeting that was held in June of this year, the proposal has been gradually refined and improved through the standard review process. The general concept remains the same as to what was presented to council in June, with minor modifications to the retail and commercial storefront size and organization, as well as modifications to the building materials proposed to be used for the 5th and 6th floors. So the 5th and 6th floors are the glassed in areas on top of the red brick. Next slide, please. So this slide is going to provide a breakdown of the updated retail and commercial elements, which I think are important to highlight as a change since when you first saw it. So the areas you see highlighted in green are the street fronting retail and commercial units that collectively provide a total of 443 square meters of publicly accessible retail space along Lakeshore Road West. The retail space provided and regulated in the bylaw is a minimum requirement. And through the site plan process, the design is expected to advance and achieve the objectives of fostering an active and healthy Main Street environment. The areas you see highlighted in purple are the publicly accessible entrances to the unit, so they're right above the green all the way along Lakeshore Road West. The areas you see in yellow are the driveways or the access points into the development. So there's 2 access points. The one on the left-hand side will be for commercial and service vehicles that are required to service the retirement home. And the access point on the right-hand side, or right in the center of the drawing, will be the principal entrance for residents and their visitors, and they're going to enter the site and proceed through the turning circle. And then there's 2 other areas. The areas in pink are like a deeper purple. Those are residential or entrances and vestibules for the residents and their visitors to enter into the retirement home itself. Next slide, please. So here's a comparison of what you saw in June versus what you see today. The proposal has been modified specifically as it relates to the provision of publicly accessible retail and commercial units along the ground floor. So the previous iteration of the plan provided for 467 square meters of retail and commercial space along the ground floor, with approximately 150 square meters of that 467 reserved for a semi-private bistro area. So on the top, you can see there is no street fronting public entrance to the retail space on the right-hand side, as well as the office space. And that's a key area of revision here. The proposal was subsequently revised to provide a total of 443 square meters of publicly accessible retail and commercial space along the ground floor of the development. The retail and commercial space being provided exceeds the minimum requirements of the town zoning bylaw and meets all requirements of the applicable provisions that sort of regulate retail and commercial space along the ground floor in the MU1 zone. So I just want to reiterate that the retail and commercial space provided is a minimum requirement, as you'll see in the bylaw, and that through the site plan process, should we proceed there, the design is expected to advance and achieve all of the objectives of maintaining and establishing a healthy and active Main Street environment. Next slide, please. So the official plan amendment would permit a maximum building height of 6 stories on the subject lands within the Main Street 1 designation and proposes to remove the lands eligible for bonusing overlay. So this is Schedule P1 out of the town's official plan, and throughout most of this Lakeshore Road West between East Street and Jones Street, we have lands eligible for bonusing as an overlay. That is no longer a functional policy as per changes to the Planning Act. Next slide, please. So the proposed zoning bylaw amendment will apply site-specific zoning regulations to the existing MU1 zone for the subject lands. The site-specific regulations will enable the development of the 6-story mixed-use retirement home and will provide opportunities for further refinement and enhancements through the site plan control process. The proposed amendment recognizes site development elements dealing with overall building height, rooftop mechanical equipment, and setback requirements for the underground parking structure. Next slide, please. All written public comments received as of the date of the staff report were included in the report and were commented upon by staff. Key considerations as part of the review and evaluation of the proposal were rooted in staff, public, and council comments that were received over the duration of the application's lifetime. Council, staff, and members of the public identified the key considerations you see on the screen above. Next slide, please. So some of the matters that will be addressed during the site plan control processes are highlighted on this slide and include urban design considerations, landscaping requirements, planting plans, on-site parking, site vehicle turning and pedestrian circulation pathways, door-to-door Oakville transit services, grading, drainage, servicing requirements, and overall site functionality and design. Additionally, through the site plan process, the design and availability of retail space is expected to advance and will achieve the objectives of fostering this healthy and active Main Street environment. Next slide, please. So this is a breakdown of the process so far and the next steps that I'd like to include. So should this application be approved, the next step for Amica Brawny Village Incorporated will be to submit a site plan application to coordinate the technical development review of the site to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff put forth the following recommendation as shown for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westerhoff. Council, do you have questions or would you like to hear the delegations first? Councilor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of clarifying questions. Does the site plan process, will that also entail the construction plan in that process, or does that happen outside of that process?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor, to Councilor O'Meara, the construction management plan will form a part of the site plan control process. What we will do is basically we have a terms of reference and we'll receive that construction management plan, comment on it, and then once it's finalized, it will be incorporated into one of the final approved plans and reports that gets tied into the agreement.
Okay, perfect. And just lastly, and I know that the director has control over our site plan work, but I know Amica has spent a number of years working on site plan on their 4-story proposal. So will that factor in or possibly help expedite their site plan process with this new application, or is it starting from ground zero?
Through you, Mayor. I don't think it will hurt, considering the floor plate is essentially the same, but it is a new process and they will need to go through the standard site plan control process. So there's no real shortcuts or anything like that. And it's useful that everybody's seen it once, but it's a different application it will go through the process as a new application.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted those clarifications before the delegates went.
All righty, well, I can see the utility of that. Councillor McNeice?
So I just seen we're talking about, through your worship, site plan. So I saw on your list, on-street parking would be addressed at the site plan stage. Is that correct?
Through Mayor, that is correct.
Okay, and then also, I know we have a number of commercial visitor parking spots within our community of Bronte Village that don't have great signage, not great wayfinding. Is that something that can also be addressed at the site plan level?
Through you, Mayor, signage is not incorporated into part of the site plan application process. We have a separate process for, the approval of signs on the public realm. So they would go through a separate process, likely at the same time, though.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Council, shall we hear our delegations? Madam Clerk, would you call the registered delegations, please?
Our first delegation is Grant Gonzalez, here representing the Ontario Retirement Communities Association.
Welcome, Mr. Gonzalez, and to any members of ORCA who are with you.
Myself.
All right.
Thank you, Worship, members of council. My name is Grant Gonzalez. I am the Senior Manager for Government Relations and Corporate Affairs at the Ontario Retirement Communities Association, or ORCA, based here right in Oakville. I'm here to speak in support of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment with respect to the project by Amica Bronte Village, Inc. at 2370 Lakeshore Road West. Since 1977, ORCA has been the voice of Ontario's retirement communities, and we remain committed to setting a standard for operational excellence in the sector. ORCA represents over 90% of licensed retirement suites in Ontario, and retirement communities are regulated by the Retirement Homes Act 2010 and are licensed and inspected by the Retirement Homes Regulatory Authority. ORCA is calling on the town of Oakville to support the construction of retirement homes in your community, in particular this project at 2370 Lakeshore Road West. As you know, the Ontario government has committed to build 1.5 million new homes by 2031 and has set aggressive housing targets to 29 of the large and fastest growing municipalities, including the town of Oakville, with a target of building 33,000 new homes by 2031. The construction of retirement homes will support the town in achieving those targets. Additionally, retirement homes bring significant local economic benefits and, most importantly, allow seniors to age in place in a community of their choosing. Projects like this one will help the town achieve its goals, as highlighted in the draft housing strategy and action plan that the Planning and Development Council considered at its last meeting, I believe, to enable a greater diversity of housing types in more places throughout the town where appropriate, focusing on housing types, sizes, and tenures that are in short supply, including a full range of housing that meets the needs of residents throughout all of their life, their stages in life. This is identified as a priority action item for the town. But beyond meeting your housing targets, there are several reasons why municipalities like Oakville must support the construction of retirement homes. Seniors bring significant local economic benefits and social benefits to communities. In 2018, CMHC said and called on municipal governments to attract and support older residents by supporting a range of housing options that allow them to age in place, including retirement communities. A proactive approach to building age-friendly communities will help municipalities prepare for the upcoming, and dare I say it's already here, demographic shifts and the housing pressures that come with it. Additionally, CMHC highlighted that seniors hold more assets and less debt, maximizing their abilities to support local businesses and organizations, and noted that most spending by seniors is local, including household expenses, food, transportation, clothing, recreation, and gifts. It supports local employment in retail and service businesses. Through them, older residents contribute to the tax base of local municipalities. Retirement homes create vibrant communities, and by and large, the vast majority of people living and moving into retirement homes are already from the community in which they're relocating to. So, In this case, in this project, many of the residents that would move into this home would already have been or already are residents of the town of Oakville. And that's the same in any municipality across Ontario, maybe with the exception of Toronto or other municipalities where folks might want to move into quieter communities after living in an urban setting. I want to shift now to speak a little bit more about the demographic shifts in Ontario. As you know, the number of seniors as a proportion of Ontario's population is growing rapidly, a significant number of whom continue to choose to live in single-family homes. According to StatsCan from 2016 to 2021, the number of persons aged 65 and older rose 18.3% to 7 million, representing almost 1 in 5 Canadians, up from 16.9% in 2016. The significant increase in the seniors demographic presents a critical need for provincial and municipal governments to unlock more housing stock by incentivizing seniors to downsize. Policy directions that support seniors downsizing, including supporting the development of retirement homes, will not only open up more single-family homes, but will also allow for gentle densification through potential redevelopment of these homes into multi-unit dwellings, including triplexes. Ontario municipalities and housing experts are already starting to take notice. I would encourage members of council to review the recent Globe and Mail article, where experts noted that there are a growing number of people who are overhoused, with 29% of singles and couples living in a home with a minimum of 3 bedrooms. The deputy chief economist of the CMHC said that the concern is maybe the people with all these spare bedrooms would like to move somewhere in their community, but there is nowhere more suitable for them to live in. Well, retirement homes are in a strong position to fill at least part of that gap. And in their annual seniors housing industry report, Cushman and Wakefield noted that over the next 20 years, the age 75 plus segment is expected to grow by almost 4% per year and will account for 13.5% of the total population by 2040. And to maintain the current level of seniors housing inventory per capita, total supply will need to more than double over 20 years. And the last point I want to call to attention is that retirement homes are a critical part of the robust continuum of care in Ontario. Retirement homes have an important role to play in reducing pressures on the publicly funded healthcare system. Health Quality Ontario pointed to the fact that the median waiting period for a long-term care bed in 2021-22 was over 7 months for those living in the community and almost 3 months for those living in hospital. We also know that as a result of the current structure of the Ontario long-term care waitlist policies, seniors are moving out of communities and into including retirement homes and into long-term care prematurely. In fact, the Canadian Institute for Health Information pointed out that in 2021-22, 1 in 10 newly admitted long-term care residents potentially could have been cared for in a home community. In the town of Oakville, there are 5 long-term care homes with a bed capacity of 790 and a wait list of 3,305. And that's as of April 30th, 2023. So retirement homes can play a role in reducing this long wait list by as many as 331 based on the CIHI, the Canadian Institute for Health Information figures. Furthermore, retirement homes reduce pressure on local hospitals. With a lack of appropriate housing options, some seniors are languishing in hospital beds as what they term alternative level of care ALC patients. In other words, people who don't really need a hospital bed, but also cannot move to their own home safely. Earlier this year, the Ontario Hospital Association reported that there are more than 6,000 people designated ALC, or about 1 in 5 occupying a hospital bed. 28% of those patients are waiting for supervised or assisted living or home and community care. So in conclusion, seniors deserve housing options like retirement homes, which make it easier for them to access the care that they need in a location of their choosing, appropriate care, options that help them connect with their care providers more easily, that provides more choices for those seniors with higher care needs to remain in a community setting, and that keeps them healthier and in the community longer and out of the public system. So Orca is calling on the town of Oakville to be part of the solution and collaborate with the sector, including operators like Amica, to support the construction of retirement homes. And by working together, we're putting the health, safety, and well-being of seniors first. This project will lightly densify the area, provide much-needed housing for seniors to continue to live in their community here in Oakville, and again, reduce pressure on the publicly funded system. Thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez, for the time you took to bring us that information. Councillor Elgar has a question for you.
Thank you, through Mayor Burton. Okay, so you've got this has 159 units, and you've got 56 independent living units. What do you figure the number of people will be living in the 56 units? Like one person, two people?
So I can't speak to the details of this particular application. I think Amica might be in a better position to speak to that. I'm here to share more generally about the value of supporting the construction of retirement homes in municipalities, including the town of Oakville.
Are Amica here to speak tonight?
I believe they are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you,
Madam
members.
Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
Next delegation is Mike Cuddle.
Mr. Cuddle, welcome. Council looks forward to your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name's Mike Cuddle, and I am a 30-year resident of the town of Oakville and 12-plus year resident of my wife and I here in Bronte. I love this place, and I've chosen to be an active village resident and support my local businesses and my community wherever possible. My comments this evening are in support of the application to have Amica build what they've applied to build, what they've applied for to build on Lakeshore. There was once a fanciful document created called the Livable Oakville Plan that I was introduced to during my short stint as a board member at the Bronte BIA. I thought it was a thoughtful and forward-thinking plan for how Oakville ought to grow. I believe that document was first created in 2009. Well, the world has changed since then, and it's changed in a way that no one could have foreseen. Nowhere in that livable plan do I believe that there were 30-story high-rise condos on Dundas and some of the other explosive development that our town has experienced. Nowhere in that plan was it foreseen that Canada would be welcoming 450,000 new Canadians this year and proposed 500,000 by 2025. So Canada's certainly changed. Our town is changing, and businesses and government need to adapt to this rapidly changing reality of what Canada is and aspires to be. This in cycle with the statistics we just heard about our aging population and the tsunami of housing needs that this is creating is a very compelling argument, and I found it very interesting listening to Orca's explanation of what the realities are in our world. When this development first came to light several years ago, I recall some of the initial resistance to having Amica build a seniors residence on what was considered prime commercial property in the heart of our village. There was a sense that this development was not the, quote, optimal use of this prime commercial property. Well, I think the world of commerce has changed and continues to change. It was changing long before the pandemic hit us, but I think the message is clear. The demand for traditional bricks and mortar commercial and retail space, especially in secondary markets like Bronte Village, has plummeted, and I don't think it's coming back. There's also concern expressed by many about the kind of care that the Amica Care facility is going to provide, that Alzheimer's and similar high security needs patients were essentially going to turn the building into a lockup that would not add any vitality to our community. Well, it now appears the facility has a variety of floors offering a range of senior care in a variety of environments. The irony, to me, of the Amica application is that it meets all the basic conditions that I thought were laid out in the initial livable Oakville plan, as it was explained to me. I understood there was a 4+2 formula for zoning along that stretch of Oakville, and I anticipated that this application would have somehow met that condition. But I'm learning tonight that there's other angles to it, and I trust council and this committee to understand it much better than me. I'm positive, though, that this facility will be a positive addition to the culture of our little village. And I'm pleased to hear that the additional 2 floors on the top are going to be independent living, which is essentially the kind of independent senior living that someday I aspire to live in myself. I'm aware that there are people who have objected to a 6-story building of any kind being built in this site. I've heard stories about sunlight being blocked and bird flightways being altered and all kinds of things. But sometimes it sounds as if we're living in the middle of Algonquin Park and this is 1980. The reality is we live 50 kilometers from downtown Toronto. It's one of the largest, most diverse, and fastest growing metropolises in the world. Yet we somehow feel entitled to hang on to the trappings of our charming little fishing village, which was for many years on the wrong side of the tracks. As I said earlier, I love living in Bronte, and I understand why many Bronte old-timers long for the days of the old village with Bill Hill's Marketeria, the old drive-in restaurant, and many other things. But we don't own Bronte. We just live here, and we can't make up rules just to suit ourselves. We can only ask that you, our elected representatives, make sound and forward-thinking decisions about how our community is to evolve and grow and meet the needs of its citizens. From what I understand, the facility that Amica is proposing is desperately needed, and I'm sure it's going to be sold out before it's finished. Amica is a Canadian market leader in this kind of facility. They're proven professionals in building quality facilities and operating them in a professional manner. They're also professionals in making money, lots of it from what I understand, but they are proven leaders in meeting the housing needs of our aging population. And I anticipate a quality facility being built. My concern is that if this committee further delays, or if staff further delays, or makes this application more difficult, precious time will be lost. I'm disappointed to hear that the fact that the 4-story application, as it was initially met, will not significantly expedite the time that staff's going to take to provide the site plan approval that's required, but processes have to be followed. I just would encourage council to support in any way possible the needs to expedite this project. They say that the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. Well, in my opinion, there are many things that should have been done 10 years ago here in the Bronte end of town. But as Winston Churchill said, perfection is the enemy of progress. I think this Amica project is progress, so let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cuddle, for the time you took to share your thoughts with us this evening. Council, do you have questions for Mr. Cuddle? Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Dr. Ronald Wharton.
Dr. Wharton, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Members of Council, Mayor Burton. This is not a prop to make my case. I'm learning again how to walk following knee replacement a couple of weeks ago. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. Many of you, or at least some of you, have seen me before in this spot, twice in 2012 when I appeared before you with the goal of accelerating the registration of the Shores condominium. And you were very cooperative and helped us at that time, and we appreciated that. I appeared before you again in 2014 when the town bestowed on me its certificate of recognition related to my induction into the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame. That honor was for achievements as a medical research scientist, where I spent 25 years at Sick Kids and a decade as founding CEO of the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute. I tell you this because I want you to know that my view on the matter before us is based, at least in part, on a lifetime of hospital-based research dedicated to improving healthcare for Canadians. Not only my own research, but all of the people who worked with me and for me. Now, my wife and I, well into our 80s, find ourselves on the other side of the healthcare table, facing some significant challenges that do not acquire acute care in a hospital, but may soon, in the next year, 2, 3, may require some moderate assistance in a facility like Amica, where meals are prepared and residents have access to a spectrum of care that it would be available as needed. The level of care we might require is called independent living, and that is exactly what is proposed for the 2 additional floors at the planned Amica facility on Lakeshore Road. We got into this, and what stimulated me to speak to you today is that knowing that we might need such a facility in the next year or 3, we started looking around. We went to a few places. We visited a few retirement homes. We made lots of inquiries. And what we discovered is that such accommodation, especially in the independent living category, is in very high demand, with extensive waiting lists at Amica and other similar facilities. And you just heard from an expert who gave you the actual numbers of people on the waiting lists. So you know those numbers. As we were speaking with the folks at Amica and realized that there was a new facility being planned for Lakeshore Road, we asked a simple question. That might come along just about the time when we might need it. How do we get our names on a waiting list so that we have that option when the time might come? And at that point, we were astounded to learn that the new Amica facility planned at that time would only accommodate 2 levels of care, assisted living and memory care, with the independent living section being dependent on the addition of these 2 new floors. And that kind of astounded me. I would have thought that maybe from the very beginning it would have been planned with 6 floors, including all 3 levels of care. But now that the new floors have been proposed and are being supported by staff, in my view, it would really be a lost opportunity if the town were to deny the addition of the 2 new floors needed to make the spectrum of care complete. I'd like to close by noting that in my decade on the Ottawa Hospital senior management team, I repeatedly learned, and you heard this earlier this evening, repeatedly learned that a prime reason for hospital overcrowding is the inability to discharge people who do not need to be in a hospital, but who lack the alternate level of care required upon leaving the hospital. Hospitals will not send you home to an empty home if you have nobody to care for you there. The proposed new Amica facility provides this alternate level of care, and with the addition of the 2 floors, will provide 3 distinct levels of care to accommodate people who otherwise might find themselves taking up space in an acute care hospital when they do not need to be there. So please do not pass up this opportunity to approve a simple addition to an existing planned facility to maximize the opportunity for Oakville seniors to receive the care they need as they need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wharton, very much for taking the time and the trouble to bring us that informed view. Are there questions for Dr. Wharton? Thank you, sir. Council, is there any discussion, or may I call a vote? Oh, all right. I'm polling, am I polling the audience for this? Yes? Then, Mr. Shea, come on up and share your thoughts.
Thank you. It's a bit embarrassing that I didn't register earlier, but I thought of that when I was on the golf course earlier today. Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of Town Council. I'm with the Bronte Village Residents Association. In June, I delegated to this matter, raising 4 issues of concern. Last week, I downloaded the staff's recommendation report to see if any of the issues that I raised were addressed in the recommendation report. In my June delegation, I stated, quote, "We are pleased that Amica has acknowledged the community's need for more retail at grade and have decided now to have a portion of their retail space for public access from the sidewalk. We would have preferred to have it all, but we recognize their need to have space to service their residents. Now," end quote, "now Amica is making available public retail space on both sides of the driveway entrance. We are certainly not going to make up for all the retail space lost with this one development, but having these 2 spaces now available for public retail will be beneficial, and we acknowledge Amica's decision." Again, from my June delegation, I stated, quote, "The BVRA was aware from the community who live to the east of the proposed development regarding their concerns from shadowing. We addressed shadow concerns with Amica when we spoke to them," end quote. I stated in my previous delegation how I personally understand these shadowing concerns because I too will live in the shadows of the building now being built next to where I live. I was impressed to read in the recommendation report that Amica, after hearing the concerns from the public on shadowing, actually ran a second shadow study. The results may not have changed, but the effort to conduct a second study needs to be acknowledged. And this is in sharp contrast with Podium Developments, who is the developer of the building next to my residence, who took no such action even after we had delegated submitting a highly detailed 12-month shadow study. In June, I addressed parking. I stated, quote, "We ask Amica to consider off-street parking in front of their building as the site is being built out now. Waiting for the Lakeshore Road reconstruction, which is at a minimum 5 years away, and more likely 7 to 10 years away until that construction is completed," okay, that's not me, "to have off-street parking is not an option. We need the extra parking now. And Amica's willingness to modify their site plan to accommodate additional street parking now should not only be approved, but more importantly, welcomed." Now, based on Councilor McNeese's comment earlier, this may be addressed at site plan, but my written comments are, and I'm quite disappointed that there is no reference to lay-by parking in the staff recommendation report. My closing comment tonight is the same as my closing comment in June. It's the placement of the utility lockers. On one hand, I'm encouraged that Amica has acknowledged our concern and is willing to have an aesthetically pleasing screen to shield the gas meter as an attempt not to distract from a vibrant retail appearance. On the other hand, I'm still disappointed that we have this conversation, and I'm wondering why the utility lockers couldn't be installed on the inside of the driveway entrance. Lastly, and as stated previously in June, the BVRA supports the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Amica Bronte Village, Inc. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shea, for taking the trouble and your inspiration on the golf course.
Thank you. I played well, actually.
Anyone else? We have a representative from Amica online if you have a meaningful question for him, or any other kind. All right. Mr. Chong, can you hear us? And can you fire up your, Councilor O'Meara, do you have something in the meantime?
I can wait.
All right. Then we're all going to wait. I take it Jill's admitting him or something? Is that what's going on? Okay. I'm not seeing him, but
Yeah, there he is.
there he is. Welcome, Mr. Chong. Councilor Elgar has a question for Amica, Mr. Chong. Councilor Elgar.
Thank you. Through Mayor Burton to Mr. Chong. Mr. Chong, just curious, planning, we're getting a lot into people per unit. And I look at what you've got at Amica, And I'm just wondering, what are you proposing in the independent dwelling units? The percentage of people, that'll be one or two, like, is it one, would you think there'll be 2 people per unit? Is that what you're projecting? Based on your history of how it is?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that question of the actual operation would be better answered by Amica in terms of the accommodation of people per unit. As a planner, we work with the architect to design the built form, but we're not really involved with Amica in terms of programming of those units. So I know the Amica representatives are here in attendance.
Well, let's see if they are. Is there anyone from Amica here? Oh, good. Thank you, Mr. Chong. And if you could just identify yourself and answer Councilor Elder, please.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. My name is Alison Keller, and I'm the Site Development Ambassador for Amica Senior Lifestyles, Inc. And so through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor, and your question regarding the potential number of people that could be residing in the proposed 2 additional floors, I have some interesting numbers for you on that point. There are 57 suites. We could look at approximately 61 to 65 people living there. But what is very interesting, based on an average length of stay of approximately 3 years, over a 9-year period, you could house nearly 250 people on those 2 floors alone. And I think that's a substantive number to consider.
Okay, what I'm trying to get is, if you have, say, 100 units, what is the average number of people that'll be in the 100 units? Like, that's what I'm trying to get, is it 1.9 people on average? Like, do you start off with 2 and do they go to 1? Like, I'm just trying to, we're getting into a lot of planning issues for all of Oakville. And we get into, we get into, okay, here's how many units we're going to build. Now, how many people are going to live there? And I know, when you get into your, the specialized units, I think it would be 1. I think that's pretty fair to say.
Yes, although we do have accommodations where you could have a couple potentially move in and live together in memory care. But we provide flexibility for couples to make the choice that if they wanted to have their own separate suites. We really try to accommodate as many different lifestyle options and choices as possible, and help, most importantly, to help couples who are still together continue to reside together within the same residence, so that you're not having a situation of, the stress of people being separated and commuting between long-term care and retirement residences. Hence our proposal for the full continuum of care, as Dr. Wharton was referring to earlier today. But for your specific ratio, it really depends on the suite mix, how many 2 bedrooms are being proposed in the residences. So when you're taking a look at that, that is of consideration. The good news is that more couples are living longer and living together. You can have couples certainly move into 1-bedroom apartments together as well too. You could even have a couple move in together in a studio. So the actual ratio that you'd be looking at, I'd have to go back and take a look at the math on it again. I know with the 57 suites with 61 to approximately 65.
It's 1.15.
Thank you.
People per unit.
Appreciate it. I'm just back from a holiday and my head on the math is not maybe the best right at the moment, but that's what you'd be looking at. And it is an important consideration. Okay. But I think too, as people, they look at their options and they're realizing the pressures that they have living in, their single homes or their detached homes, and looking at how they can continue living better together. Honestly, continuum of cares are an excellent part of the strategy for municipalities to look at adding to their housing mix.
Okay. I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Welcome back from vacation.
Thank you, Councillor Elder. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say, and I'm happy to move the staff recommendation here. I did want to say thank you to the Amica folks who listened. It wasn't always easy, as it sometimes cannot be, but it is a pleasure to work with a group who wants to engage with the community, wants to listen, and actually came back with substantive changes after what they heard, because that doesn't always happen, as it might surprise you, but it happened here, and I think we've got a great mix of retail, commercial, commercial on the main street, which was very important to the vibrancy and to everything that we've been trying to do in Bronte Village for a number of years. And it even from setbacks to your neighbors on the easterly portion, you listen to their concerns and did that. So I just want to thank you again for that. And it is an actual pleasure to work with you guys and work with good developers who want to listen and work with the community on that. So thank you for that, and thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Is there any objection to Councillor O'Meara's motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, so Councillor O'Meara, your motion carries. Thank you. Now, Council, I propose to call a brief bio break recess so that if there's anybody here who doesn't want to sit through the one remaining rather dry item, they could leave without disrupting it. So we're going to be in recess for 6 or 7 minutes. Had a chance for the heroes of Bronte to have their photos taken. Good night. All right, council is back in session for the rest of the meeting. Council, our next item is a double header item. On the one hand, we have a brand-new planner, Sarah Burrell, who's going to make a presentation. It's my pleasure to introduce her to you. And we have no registered delegations on this, but and we have no audience to poll, so there may not be any delegations. And she's going to update us on the status of the official plan review and the many moving parts of that. Ms. Burrell, we are ready for you.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, and good evening. I'm here to provide a brief update on the official plan review. Next slide, please. So we have two official plans in effect that guide land use decisions within the town: the Livable Oakville Plan, which applies to the lands south of Dundas Street and north of Highway 407, and the 1984 official plan as amended, which remains in effect as the parent official plan to the North Oakville secondary plans, which apply to the lands between Dundas Street and Highway 407. And one of our priorities through the official plan review is to bring the 1984 official plan, which includes the more recent North Oakville East and West secondary plans, into the Livable Oakville Plan. Next slide, please. So this slide is just provided as a reminder of our land use planning context in Ontario, which has evolved significantly since the official plan review was initiated in 2015. Our official plan review will bring the town's land use plans into conformity with current provincial legislation, policies, and plans, as well as the region of Halton's official plan. As a reminder, the land use planning regime in Ontario is governed by the Planning Act, which sets out a number of ground rules for land use planning in the province. The Planning Act has been updated a number of times since 2015, as has the 2016 provincial policy statement, which was replaced in 2020, as well as the 2017 growth plan. Thank you. Replaced by the 2019 growth plan, which was subsequently amended in 2020. And more recently, as many are aware, on April 6th of this year, the province announced the next steps in its Housing Supply Action Plan, introducing Bill 97 and releasing a draft provincial planning statement, which, as you're aware, proposes to repeal the growth plan and the current 2020 PPS and bring with and replace both with an integrated policy document. As a result, the ongoing official plan review and work program has been consistently pivoting and adapting to this evolving policy landscape, which I'll speak to in greater detail throughout the presentation. The key for the official plan review is to ensure we're catching up and conforming with all provincial and regional legislation and policy by the end of the town's official plan review. And also noted on the slide is the region of Halton's official plan, to which the town of Oakville is required to conform with. Next slide, please. So the current in effect growth plan, as amended 2020, has set land use policies that all municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe must conform with. The province has extended the planning horizon from 2041 to 2051 in the amended growth plan. The region of Halton's share of the forecasted growth for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, as you're aware, is 1.1 million people and 500,000 jobs. We are planning for new residents, but also existing residents as they transition through various stages of life and their housing needs shift. Next slide, please. So the current regional official plan process was initiated 1 year prior to the town's OP review in 2014. The region, through its ongoing regional official plan review, is determining how to accommodate its share of the forecasted growth for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Regional Official Plan Amendment, or ROPA 48, was modified and approved by the minister in November 2021, revising the regional structure, implementing a regional urban structure, shown here, and a hierarchy of strategic growth areas in the regional official plan to address local planning priorities and determine how the region plans to accommodate growth. The regional urban structure outlines major transit station areas and urban growth centers, outlined in yellow, transit-supported designated areas to accommodate much of the region's growth to 2051 and beyond. ROPA 49, the second amendment as part of the regional official plan review, was approved by the minister in November of 2022 with 45 modifications. ROPA 49 builds on the regional urban structure shown here as defined by ROPA 48. It also implemented the results of the region's integrated growth management strategy, defining how and where the region will grow. And through ministerial approvals, population and employment growth distributions were set to 2051, and new urban areas and employment conversions beyond those proposed through the original proposed adoption were included. As a result of the evolving provincial policy landscape, most notably the proposed removal of upper-tier municipal planning approval authorities introduced through Bill 23 in 2022, the town continues to work with the region to ensure conformity with the regional official plan and provincial policy as it is realized and finalized. And we will speak to this regional policy transition and transition of governance that's underway and some of the implications to the town's official plan review and ongoing work program. Next slide, please. The focus of the OP review continues to be the implementation of the town-wide urban structure in effect as of July 2021, which aims to protect natural heritage, open space, and cultural heritage, maintain established areas, and direct significant growth and intensification to the identified network of nodes and corridors. These nodes and corridors will also see much transit and infrastructure development investment, over the coming years. And the town-wide urban structure aligns with the regional urban structure implemented through ROPA 48 and refined through ROPA 49. Next slide, please. So in the earlier slides, we discussed the town-wide urban structure in full force and effect as of July 2021, which continues to be foundational to achieving progress on the official plan review. In support of our town-wide urban structure and directing growth and intensification to the identified nodes and corridors, staff resources have been primarily devoted to projects related to the town's growth areas with considerable success to date. The slides in front of you highlight the growth area reviews, corridor studies, and secondary plan reviews completed, as noted, which have resulted in a number of OPAs in full force and effect. Notably, since we last updated council on the OP review in December 2021, the OPAs for the hospital district and Bronte Go MTSA are in full force and effect. Significant progress has also been made on a number of employment-related studies and policy updates, including the Employment and Commercial Review, Part 1 of the Warehousing Review, as well as considerable progress on housing policy initiatives with public engagement on the housing strategy and action plan to be underway later this year, which will inform town-wide housing policy updates as part of the official plan review. Next slide, please. In addition to the in-effect growth area OPAs, work is also underway on a number of other growth area reviews and policy studies, notably the Midtown Oakville Growth Area Review. As you're all aware, a draft OPA was brought to a public statutory meeting on May 23rd of this year, and following that, a committee of the whole established in July of this year, with regular meetings taking place in tandem with the Midtown Oakville implementation plan noted at the bottom, with the proposed report back to council for Q4 2023. Work also continues on the Neagawa Urban Core Review, building on feedback received through the public statutory meeting on May 16th of 2022 for 2 town-initiated OPAs to establish policies for the strategic growth area with the resulting OPAs intended to address density, scale, and built form within the town's urban structure. We've also brought up on board a consultant to carry out the North Oakville East commercial study in conjunction with planning staff, and we'll be issuing a request for proposal later this year for a consultant to re-examine land use policies for the urban growth, uptown core growth area with public engagement to take place through early 2024 as planned. Next slide, please. So with that in mind and with the progress to date, we did want to highlight the still evolving provincial and regional policy context, evolving since the official plan review was initiated in 2015, to which the official plan review has had to respond and adapt to. Notably, the PPS has evolved a number of times since 2014, being replaced in 2020. The 2006 growth plan was also replaced in 2017 and 19, and then amended in 2020. And most recently, and as mentioned, is the evolving proposed 2023 PPS and repeal of the growth plan introduced April of this year, representing a fundamental shift in how growth planning is carried out in Greater Golden Horseshoe municipalities. The elimination of intensification targets, the repeal of the growth plan, and the removal of the municipal comprehensive review process will permit expansion of settlement areas at any time, shifting how, when, and where municipalities grow. Next slide, please. So building on the earlier policy timeline slide, this is just a snapshot of some of the key provincial policy changes that have impacts on our ongoing official plan review. The snapshot's not intended to be exhaustive of all of the provincial and regional policy changes to which the official plan must conform to finalize the town's official plan review. However, it does provide an indication of the work still to be completed and updated as provincial policy is realized and finalized. Notably, the removal of bonusing in Section 37 of the Planning Act, first introduced through Bill 108, to establish a new community benefits charge, and the introduction of an appeals process through Bill 138, and then subsequently in 2020, changes through Bill 197 in response to municipal concerns around impacts to municipal revenue generation tools. Will need to be addressed through the official plan review. Bonusing permissions will need to be eliminated. Community benefit charge, parkland and development charge bylaws will continue to be updated throughout 2023 and 4. And additional policy analysis and updates will be required to ensure that there are no impediments to the town's ability to obtain critical services and amenities to develop complete communities. Bill 23 also introduced a number of substantive changes, some in force, as noted, with respect to protected MTSA policies around minimum densities and inclusionary zoning permissions, as well as some that are still to be brought into force, such as the removal of upper tier planning approval authorities anticipated to be brought into force no earlier than winter of 2024. With these changes, the remaining policy matters associated with the region's official plan review, not addressed through ROPAs 48 and 49, will be transitioned to lower tier municipalities, with transitional support being provided for a period of up to 6 months. Timed with Bill 23, as you are aware, the province also released its housing pledge, requiring Oakville to commit to a housing target of 33,000 new residential units by 2031, with impacts to the OP review and joint best planning estimates. And finally, more recently in April of this year, as mentioned, the introduction of Bill 97 and the 2023 PPS, notably the narrowing of the employment areas definition through Bill 97, will require the town to conduct a town-wide study of employment areas, with particular impact on a number of our strategic growth areas, with focuses on mixed-use land designations, in order to bring our OPA into conformity with provincial policy by the finalization of the OP review. Next slide, please. So broadly speaking, comprehensive project-specific reporting has been provided and will continue to be provided to Council throughout the remainder of 23 and 24 as provincial policy is finalized and realized. And reporting will also be provided as regional transition materials on policy and governance are provided to planning staff. Any resource implications associated with evolving provincial policy will come forward to Council through the 2024 budget process. Additionally, as noted, a series of discussion papers on topics as identified will be completed throughout 23 and 24 and will inform policy updates to various sections of livable Oakville in finalization of the town's conformity OPA. Next slide, please. So with that, this does conclude tonight's presentation, and I welcome any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burrell, for your first performance in front of council. It went very well. Councilor O'Meara will now proceed to test you in some manner or other. Councilor O'Meara.
I will do no such thing. I'm sure you did great. Thank you very much for the information. I saw that we're going to be reviewing the employment definitions that the province had changed. I recall reading something that the province wanted to do something with established neighborhood character, that definition as well. Are we revisiting that, or am I misreading something? I thought there was something about they wanted to remove that ability for neighborhoods to use character as a way of stopping development. Is that in the pipeline, or am I misreading that?
Councillor, you may be recalling it from the Housing Affordability Task Force recommendation, which I'll take a stab, I think might be recommendation 44. And I don't believe that's been implemented yet. However, as I do note from time to time, the minister did promise, if promise is the right word, that he's going to implement all of the recommendations.
Okay, thank you for that. And just one last question. In what process are we where people can just start pulling permits for 3 dwelling units on their property? Or can they do that already now? Or are we in the process of folding that into our zoning bylaws? Or where is that aspect?
I believe we still need to incorporate that as part of our official plan review and the subsequent zoning bylaw amendments.
I think maybe we should call on the planning director to help our new member, our new planner.
Thank
I
you,
told
Mr.
you
Mayor.
you'd be testing her.
In addition to what Sarah was mentioning, there is the ability right now to apply for up to 3 units within a single property. It still has to go through the zoning review to ensure it still conforms with zoning. But we also have the overall residential zoning review, which is going on right now. So we may be able to update some of those standards, but you are able to apply right now. But as Sarah was mentioning, there is additional work that we have to do on our residential policies regardless.
Okay, thank you for that. And then through that exercise, we'll be looking at, okay, if you have a number of dwellings, maybe we change the setbacks, or we'll still be able to have some control over what we want if you're going to have 3 units on your, that's, okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
To flesh that out a little bit, they can apply, but they have to conform to the existing zoning setbacks and so on. Okay, so it's not Wild West yet. Although hints of that are in the air. All right, Councilor O'Meara, as you're the last one to question Ms. Burrell, I will thank her for her time with us, welcome her to the crew, and I'll ask you if you want to move receipt. Thank you, Councilor O'Meara. Any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being none, that carries. Could I have a motion to defer the next item to the August 15th meeting? Councilor Elgar, thank you. Any objection? There being none, that carries. Council, I want to make sure I do this in the right order. It's advisory committee minutes time, and we have approvals to consider recommended by the Heritage Committee. And would anyone like to move the approvals and the receipt? Councilor Giddings, any objection? Being none, congratulations, that carries. So now, how about a motion to rise and report? Councilor Longo, thank you. Any objection? That carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on the consent items, including confidential consent item 5.1. Thank you, Councilor Duddick. Public hearing item 6.1 and discussion items 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3, and advisory committee minutes 9.1 as noted by the clerk. A mover and seconder would be in order for this report. Councilor Chisholm and Councillor Elgar. Thank you very much. Any objection? There being none, that carries. Thank you, everybody. I have no new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature, except for this. It is the birthday, the 68th birthday today, of our esteemed and long-serving chair of Halton Region. I'd like on my behalf, and perhaps on all of yours, to wish him a very happy birthday and many happy returns. And I hope he's not peeved about me revealing the number. But I told him, just think, in 9 years, you'll be as old as me. So I would also ask councilors to check their mail cubbies in the office. There's important documents there that I believe you may want to see. And let's see. That is all that needs to detain us tonight. Thank you very much. It's been terrific working with you, and we are adjourned.